Welcome, everyone. This is the Shooting It Straight podcast with Justin Jackson. I am producer John. We are super excited to be with you tonight to talk some UNC basketball. It is a really big week for UNC basketball. Two marquee matchups in really cool locations. It's a showcase opportunity for the UNC basketball program, hence the name of tonight's show, what we're going to be talking about tonight. An opportunity for UNC to reestablish themselves on the national stage as they've fallen out of the AP Top 25. An opportunity to pick up some really quality wins in non-conference play before conference play starts. So this is a really critical week for the Tar Heels. We're going to talk all about it tonight. Want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors before we get into the show. Sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and by Congruity HR. Justin, how's it going? What are some of your biggest takeaways after the Salle game to get the conversation going?
Yeah, everything's good on my end, man. Excited for these couple games coming up. I think it's gonna be really cool and some really good tests for this team. I mean, they've already had some of the best tests you can have all year. But the LaSalle game, man, it was I think it was exactly kind of what I was wanting it to be for this team. Like I was wanting RJ to get some good looks, get some open looks, hopefully get into a rhythm. Obviously, he wasn't able to knock down a ton of them necessarily, but just being able to get free a little bit, kind of see and feel the ball a little bit, get into a little bit of a rhythm. Um, Obviously, the big story that everybody's talking about is Cade Tyson. So getting a shooter like him to see some shots fall, get a little bit more playing time, a little bit more of a rhythm, and really feel the game a little bit in the Dean Dome. So that was good to see. Um, and then just everything else as far as the consistency aspect that I wanted to kind of see from this team. I think they kind of got back to at least a little bit closer to that consistency that I was wanting to see from this team. As far as defensively, held them to 36%. Um, Obviously, LaSalle is just a little bit less talented of a team than North Carolina, but you still want to see them do what they're supposed to do, and I think they did that on the defensive end. And then you saw some guys kind of get back on track. You saw Elliot, cut down the turnovers. I think he had 7 assists to 1 turnover. They were able to get back out and transition, and kind of get back to their strengths. And you also saw some things that we haven't seen all year as far as, a presence inside. And I think that's going to be huge going forward. So, like I said, it was a perfect tune-up game. Obviously not the most talented team, but another team that you get to go against as opposed to yourselves in practice. So I think it was perfect.
We're getting some good comments in the chat already. If you're joining us live, we're live every single Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern. Put a comment in the chat. We'll get to those as the show goes along. You talked about consistency and kind of playing to a standard for the Tar Heels. Justin, I have to bring this up just right off the bat. The free throw shooting. That's something that really stands out to me. North Carolina was 11 of 23 on free throws, the lowest percentage in Hubert Davis's 4 seasons. I think UNC shot 38% or 39% against Louisville in 2021. That was the performance that was kind of in that same category from the history books before this. When you talk about wanting to play consistently, wanting to play with focus and effort and taking care of an opponent like LaSalle, you can't shoot like that from the free throw line. There was some, it was not necessarily one player. It was kind of spread around as well, which stood out to me. Van Allen Lubin was 2 for 4 from the line. Drake was 2 for 4. Jalen Withers 0 for 2. Ty Claude 1 for 4. That's something that I think, maybe it's practice this week. It's got to be emphasized because that's not going to get it done against the next two teams on the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously 11 for 23. That's unacceptable at any point in time. You have games like this though, where it's just even at the free throw line, it's hard to kind of find it. I think you also have to look at who was shooting them, like you had said. Drake hasn't shot a ton of free throws on the season. Obviously then you have, four from, two of the big men and Ty Claude and Van Allen. So there's eight of them, right? So I think it's, on the season, they're shooting 75.5%, right? So I don't think it's necessarily that big of a deal. Obviously, going into a game like Florida, all the little things matter. So free throws are going to be really important. So, making sure to tighten that up a little bit. But, I don't know if I'm necessarily as worried as, 47% looks from the free throw line. And thankfully, it was against a team in LaSalle that, you know, they didn't necessarily need those points. But going into these bigger games, like I said, the little things matter. And it's, turnovers, free throws, finishing layups, all those little things end up mattering whenever it comes to, bigger games. So hopefully they tighten it up. Maybe I'm sure Coach Davis made him shoot a lot extra free throws after the practices and whatnot going into this game, I guess, tomorrow?
That's right.
Um, so I'm sure they tighten it back up, but I'm not too worried about that front.
Yeah, I think UNC is already in Charlotte. We'll talk about this more as the night goes along, but a humongous game against Florida in Charlotte, part of the Jumpman Invitational tomorrow on Tuesday, and then Saturday, UCLA in Madison Square Garden. So a really exciting stretch coming up for the Tar Heels. I think another big talking point coming out of the LaSalle game was some of the lineup combinations
Mhm.
for UNC. Really interesting to see what Hubert was doing with the lineups. I think 11 guys played serious rotation minutes. James Brown maybe, so 10 guys there played a lot of minutes. To me, it felt a little bit like Hubert was tinkering, trying to find some combos that worked. UNC has also had 3 starting lineups so far this year. They went with Cadeau, RJ, then Alan Lubin, Drake Powell, and Seth on Saturday against LaSalle. So that was the combo that they rolled out there. Kind of brings up an interesting question. It's been a big debate on the message boards and among the Tar Heel basketball fan base. Do we know at this point in the season what UNC's best 5 is? Not necessarily maybe the starting lineup that's being tweaked, but Justin, do you think we have a sense of what that best 5 lineup looks like?
I think you maybe got a glimpse of it last game. Um, I think I'll say the best four. I think that fifth spot is it can be depending on matchups or maybe who's got it going that night or that sort of thing. But I think when you have those three guards, Elliot, RJ, and Seth, yes, they're smaller, but at the end of the day, those are the best three options for the guard position for this team, in my opinion. Um, and then I personally feel like Van Allen has, kind of, etched his spot out in that, five spot, as far as, playing the majority of the minutes as long as he stays out of foul trouble. So I think those four. And then I love Drake. Like I said a few shows ago, I'm full on Drake. Obviously, you can still see that there's some learning curves that he's having to kind of learn through and get through. I love what Ian's bringing off the bench as far as just a spark offensively. Um, and then everybody else James Brown brought some really, really good minutes in there. Ty Claude had some really good minutes. So, everybody else, obviously, Cade, if he's able to knock down shots and stretch the floor like he did against LaSalle, I think there's some different options. But I think those four are kind of my four as far as from here on out. That's who you'll see the majority of the time. And then for me, I'd probably go ahead and throw Drake in there just with his versatility and his size still playing small ball four. So I think that five for me starting wise and playing a good amount of minutes is, in my opinion, kind of the best lineup for them.
I'm going to bring in this question from Chip. This is a new name as well, so shout out to Chip. Thanks for watching the show tonight. It's an interesting one related to these lineup conversations. How would you change the starting lineup to handle some of the more athletic teams North Carolina plays coming up? These are 2 very challenging non-conference games coming up. Do you tweak it at all? Maybe put in Ian a little bit more for his athleticism against Florida and UCLA. What do you think about this, Justin?
Yeah, I think the issue with tweaking lineups is it messes with rhythms, right? I've always been a big believer in players kind of knowing how much they're going to play, when they're going to play, what's the rotation going to look like. I've always just liked that aspect. I've been in situations where it's not like that, and it's tough as a player to kind of, you know, coaches always say stay ready, but it's really tough to just stay ready at all times, and not really know when your opportunity might be. But I think when you start to tweak lineups just based on matchups, I think that's when it can kind of get kind of messed up with the rotations, and the rhythm and the flow. I think it starts to get to the point of, okay, well, hey, this team is a little more athletic, so let's throw Ian in there. Well, Ian's never started a basketball game before, so you know, starting as opposed to coming off the bench is a totally different experience, right? Whether it's conditioning, uh, the hype of the game, adrenaline, it's totally different. So you begin to throw people out there that have never been in that position, and you put people who have been in that position onto the bench, and the bench is a totally different field coming off of as opposed to starting. So for me, I've always been a believer in, hey, this is who we have, this is the lineup that we have, no matter what team we're playing against. Now rotations might be different within the game as the game kind of gets going, and maybe you need a different matchup against a different player. But I think as far as starting the game, I think you have to start with whoever you think and who you're rolling with, and then just kind of read the game from there. So eh, those five that I had mentioned, I think that's kind of who they should roll with going from here on out. And then as the games happen, then that's whenever you make the adjustments. If Cade Tyson has it going, you got to leave him out there maybe more for than Drake. If Drake has it going, if Ian has it going, then they've got to play a little bit more. Um, and me personally, it goes for everybody. If Van Allen's not playing great and Jalen Washington's showing some really good spurts, then hey, Jalen Washington, you play. If RJ doesn't have it going, if Elliot doesn't have it going, hey, let's get somebody out there maybe for a few minutes, see if they can do anything and kind of get things rolling. I think that's within the game is kind of whenever you make those adjustments. But as far as starting, I'd say just stick with who we're rolling with, and then we'll go from there.
You brought up Jalen Washington. That's actually where my head was going with this conversation as well. Maybe less from a starting perspective, but just from a minutes perspective from him. So on Saturday, he played only 8 minutes. He had 3 points, Jalen Washington, 0 for 1 from 3-point land, grabbed only 2 rebounds. That was kind of something we saw in Maui a little bit as well. The Michigan State game, he only played 13 minutes, had 0 points. I think, coming into the season, there was so much praise for Jalen Washington. I don't remember the exact quote, but Hubert Davis at one point said something to the effect of he's the best shooting big man I've seen in high school or something like that. Yet this season, we you just haven't quite seen it from him. He hasn't shot the ball super well. He hasn't been a willing shooter when he gets the ball at the top of the key and things like that. Feels like he's finding his role within the team, no longer in the starting lineup. I'm wondering maybe where his mentals are at, where his head's at this point in the season. And then the big man rotation, I mean, it definitely seems in flux. You have a lot of options at this point in the season, which is a good thing. But maybe not a lot of guys still that you can trust. I think VAL is farthest along there. But Ty Claude has been in and out of the lineup with some injuries. James Brown still hasn't played a lot of good minutes. He looked good on Saturday, but he hasn't played a lot of minutes throughout the season. I think it stands out too in just the counting stats for some of the bigs. Through 10 games played, Jalen Washington is averaging 6 points and 5 rebounds. Jalen Withers averaging 6 points, 5 rebounds. And VAL averaging 6.8 points and 5 rebounds. So not a lot of differentiation there in the stats as well. Justin, where are you at with the big man rotation? And who do you think could maybe start to play more and more as the season goes along?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I think Van Allen has taken a step ahead of the other bigs. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a set in concrete type of situation. For us, our lineups were basically set. Right, my junior year it was Joel, me, When Theo was hurt, it was Kenny, then it was Isaiah and Kennedy, and that really never changed, right? So we were blessed to kind of have that situation when it came to rotations and starting lineup. I think I think it's really going to end up coming down to kind of these last couple of games, who plays the best, who plays the hardest, who gives the team the best advantages on both ends. Obviously, Vin Allen is smaller than Jay Wash, so defensively he's probably at a disadvantage most of the time. Especially, you look at a team like Florida; they've got some real size, at least some length on the inside. So maybe this is the opportunity for Jay Wash to kind of, solidify himself, or, maybe it's a situation where Ty Claude, with his energy and his effort, maybe he comes in and he, really, causes some real issues on the inside for this team. So, when I say that it's the four, those are the four that I am going with. I think it's just everything that I've seen Vin Allen give this team. I think one of the biggest missing pieces at times in this season is screen setting. And I think Vin Allen sets the best screens. And a lot of times he's on the receiving end of a lot of, dump downs or, slip outs to finishes and things like that. So with this team and the way it's set up, I think Vin Allen is kind of that best option at that big. But like I said, you still got a couple more games, a few more games before ACC conference play starts, right? And then once ACC conference play starts, usually that's whenever the rotations kind of get cut down and you really know who's going to play when and how much and things like that. So you still have a few more games for these guys to kind of, try to solidify themselves and, you know, make their mark and, make coach play them. And so I guess we'll just see kind of over the next few games.
To add this to this conversation, I'll pull out the calculator here, give the advanced stats. Just kind of interesting to see which lineups stand out. The highest 5-man lineup in the evanmia.com observed efficiency margin, which is just basically the best lineup, is RJ, Ian Jackson, Seth, Jay Wash, and Jay Witt. So an interesting lineup, one that we haven't mentioned. I think Ian being a part of that for his offense maybe makes a little bit of sense there. And then the top 3-man lineup, actually, interestingly enough, is RJ, Seth, and Jay Wash. Now, the advanced metrics also seem to really like Cade Tyson, maybe doing a little bit of projecting or including the preseason rankings in some of those. But Cade had his best game of the season without a doubt on Saturday. There's a really good story on InsideCarolina.com by Evan Rogers, our beat writing intern, who talked a little bit about what Hubert said in the locker room to Cade after the game. That's a fun one, so go check that story out. Justin, as a shooter, you had to be rooting for Cade, and it must have been fun to watch the ball go in the basket for him on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good. Happy for him to kind of first have his, I'll say breakout game, but just to see the ball go into the hole a few times. I think the biggest thing with Cade is there was no hesitation for him. Now, with all of this, we obviously have to preface it with the fact that LaSalle is a very less talented team than North Carolina has played the majority of times this year and probably will play going forward, right? So we have to preface it with that. But with that being said, I think just seeing the ball go through the rim, catching the ball, not hesitating. I mean, there was a few times the ball was kicked to him and the defender was right there. He just didn't have a hand up, right? And he still shot it, no hesitation. Whether he makes it or misses it, I love that shot, right? So I think with Cade, it's just a matter of staying confident and, knowing what his role and his skill and his strength is for this team. You know what I'm saying? I think with this team, him being able to stretch the floor, him being able to knock down shots, that's the strength, right? So if there's ever a time when he's in the game and he has some sort of space, he should always be aggressive, whether that means shooting it or giving him a pump fake to keep him honest, whatever it is, always playing to that strength. And I think that's kind of what you saw in this game. He came out, hit his first 3, he missed a couple more, but then it kind of opened up the rest of the game for him. He had a dunk in there, he had a putback, like he got to the free throw line, so there was I just love the fact that there was so much confidence involved in his game. And I think that's going to be huge for him going forward. Um, and what I would tell him is to play with that same confidence, no matter if it's LaSalle or Florida or Auburn or whoever, because it just makes this team that much better.
That brings in our question here from Tito, parentheses Tito, on YouTube. That's your YouTube name. Thanks for putting in this comment here. They ask, with a shooter's type of mentality with a game such as Cade had, how does one go into the Florida game? Would they start running plays for him or let the offense generate for itself through sets? So really more, Justin, I think maybe that first part of that question from a mentality perspective. As a shooter, how can one really strong game carry into the next game? And what could that look like for Cade this week?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's just remembering that confidence, remembering the no hesitation. A lot of times, whenever with shooters, if you think just a little bit too much, right? As a shooter, so much has to go right whenever you're shooting, right? Like the ball has to go the right distance in the air. It has to have the right arc. You have to have the mechanics right. Like it has to come off your fingertips the right way. So if you throw any kind of doubt mentally into that shot, a lot of times it's not going to go in, right? So with Cade, it's not mechanics, it's not release, it's none of that. I think it's just a matter of him shooting confidently every single time and not thinking about it. At the end of the day, if you miss, it's a miss, right? You get back on defense, you play defense. But you could kind of see what I love to see was every shot that he made, you could see the confidence building, right? And that's just kind of how shooters work. You make one or two, you I mean, you feel like the next one's going down for sure. And so with him, it's a matter of just staying that way, whether he plays 24 minutes next game or he plays 12 minutes next game. No matter what minutes or rotation he is in, always being ready to shoot, always shooting with all the confidence that he has had his entire career, and everything else will work out exactly that way. I think the second part of that question, I think, is kind of where it's I don't think you'll see a change of offense. I don't think you'll see all of a sudden, Coach Davis calling plays out for him to go and, have three pin downs and a curl and, all sorts of stuff. I think maybe you'll see out of timeouts whenever he's in games. Maybe you write something up to try to get open, look for him or something like that. But if you look at the shots that he had, it was all from him just spacing. His first four threes, it felt like were just him being in the corner, the guards driving downhill and kicking him to the corner, and then everything else just kind of opened up from there. So I'm sure all of his looks are just going to be out of the flow of the offense, and that's really all he needs with the guard play that they have and the way that Elliot's getting downhill and the gravity that RJ has, and then the way Seth's been playing. I mean, all he needs to do is really space and be ready to knock it down.
I have a couple more Cade points that I want to get to. We have a good comment/question from Jeffrey as well that I'm going to hit on. But first, I want to take a quick second and talk about our sponsors in more depth here at the halfway mark of tonight's episode. We want to thank and acknowledge Johnny T-Shirt. They are the best place for Tar Heel gear, a Chapel Hill tradition since 1983, and 20-year partners with Inside Carolina. You can visit them on Franklin Street or check out their online store. If you need to do some holiday shopping, if you want to go buy some gear for a trip to Charlotte or to Madison Square Garden later this week, Johnny T-Shirt is the place to do it. Also want to give a shout out to Congruity, the leading provider for Tar Heel business owners' payroll, HR, and employee benefits needs. Inside Carolina listeners can get a free payroll and HR assessment by emailing Matt@Congruity. It's another great gift to get under the Christmas tree. You can get a free payroll and HR needs assessment from Congruity. So shout out to both of our sponsors there. We'll be right back on the audio version with more UNC basketball talk. We'll keep it rolling here, though, on YouTube. Thanks everyone for watching live with us. We have 60 people here on a Monday night talking about UNC basketball, an exciting time in the season. We were talking before the break about Cade Tyson. A couple more things to hit on with him. He really was the the big story coming out of that game on Saturday. And I think it actually kind of nicely segues into this question because it's a little bit more forward looking here from Jeffrey Polly. Not necessarily a question, but we're going to comment on it a little bit. Jeffrey says, we need Cade to be good to reach our full potential. I think that is a really interesting comment because we already have talked about tonight. Maybe Cade's not in that initial group of 4 core players. UNC already has such good guard play. Hubert Davis himself has said that offense necessarily isn't the problem with this team. It's defense and rebounding. And yet still, I think there's a lot to Jeffrey's comment here that a good Cade Tyson knocking down shots is what's going to allow UNC to reach its full potential. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, I don't think that the offensive side of the ball is the real issue for this North Carolina team. I mean, you look at basically points per game, they're in the top 10, if not top 5. Um, Offensively, they're in the majority of the categories, within the top 20 in the entire country, right? So offensively, I don't think that's the issue. I think defensively is kind of where, and that's why I've been very happy to kind of see the last couple games. I think that's where the consistency has to continue to get better. I think offensively, is Cade important to this team? I think he is going to be very important um, in certain games. I think that, he's going to have games where he knocks down 3 or 4 threes whenever we really need it. Um, I think he is somebody that being able to space the floor and spread the floor and have his size and his, that aspect of things. I think he is very important to this team. Um, the statement of him being good to reach the full potential, um, I think for me, I would say RJ being really good has to happen for this team to reach their full potential. You watch you watch that game, and like I said, everything happened in it that I wanted to see happen. RJ was able to get some really, really easy and good looks, probably some of the easiest he's seen all season, and just wasn't able to knock it down. So for me, RJ is kind of the guy that I would say for this team to reach their full potential, which it's easy to say that with the type of accolades and everything that he's accomplished already. But I think a lot of times on the floor, he's going to have the most gravity, the most attention. And a lot of times, whenever it comes down to the end of the game, I think RJ is going to be the main guy who is going to have the ball or be involved at some part of an offensive possession. And he's shown what he is very capable of doing. So, like I said, I think Cade is very important to this team. I think he's one of those guys too in the next 3 games or however many before ACC play starts that he could kind of, open up a little niche for himself as well for this team. Um, and so it was good to see him knock down some shots against LaSalle and play confidently.
Absolutely. Final points on Cade from me. I think the balance is so critical, specifically in that corner 3-point spot that he likes to sit in. Defenses are loading up on pick and rolls for the Tar Heels. So having that counterbalance in the corner, whether it's, Jalen Withers, whether it's Cade, just someone there who's ready to take that shot and who can occupy the attention of deep defenses is really important. I mean, if I was on the team, I could go there and stand in the corner, but it would not make a difference because no one would even notice me. But if Justin was in the corner, if a shooter like Cade is in the corner, that changes the entire flow of the offense. And Elliot's a good enough passer to see that and just make that swing pass. Ian had a few pretty good passes. It's
Mhm.
actually a pretty good. There's a lot of players on the team for UNC who can see the floor pretty well, and they know where the ball is supposed to go. I think some of that's coaching as well with Hubert. So having that player in the corner there is so important. It was good to see Cade's teammates. UNC were really rooting for him. You like
Mhm.
to see that from a team perspective that Hubert's thinking ahead a little bit. Hey, this is a good opportunity for him to get back into it. His teammates see the same thing. Let's, give him some pats on the back after a rough, start to the season for his standards. So a lot of positives there. The defense still has to, keep an eye on that. That's important, especially heading into these next two games, but definitely a good performance from him. I think another player who really stood out from the box score perspective was Elliot Cadeau. I mean, on the one hand, you have the 7 assists and 1 turnover, and that really, is what you expect from him. He was maybe more in control, but also just 4 points, 0 for 3 from the 3-point line. Justin, what did you see out of Elliot against LaSalle? Did it raise any concerns or red flags for you heading into these next two critical games?
I think when I look at Elliott, I don't necessarily look at his scoring as far as affecting the game. I think the last few games, turnovers have kind of been the biggest issue for the team and mainly for Elliott. And so to see him go 7-1 assist to turnover this game, and a lot of them also led to fouls. So I mean, he very easily could have had 10 plus assists in this game. And so him getting back to that, taking care of the ball, getting downhill, making plays, I think was very encouraging for me. The scoring aspect, I think the reality of kind of the situation with Elliott nowadays is teams are starting to scheme against him to force him to shoot shots that maybe he doesn't want to shoot, right? So a lot of times you see guys going under on ball screens. So it's either you step behind the screen and you shoot it, or you just kind of come off and the defense is right there and you don't really have an advantage, or you have to rescreen and then it takes more time out of the shot clock. So I think for Elliott, just like with Cade, it's a matter of, hey, if I'm going to step behind this screen and shoot, I'm going to shoot it confidently, right? I'm not going to hesitate. I'm not going to think about it. And if they're going to continue to give it to me, then I'm going to have to take at least a couple of them to keep them honest. But I think that's kind of what you're seeing offensively for Elliott is teams are just starting to scout a little bit differently than we saw at the beginning of the season, where he was able to kind of just take his man off the dribble if they were pressuring him and go finish and things like that. So from that aspect of things, I just want him to play confidently. Whether that means him shoot 4 or 5 threes behind the screen, or just find different ways to get into the paint and create for other guys. He's athletic enough that he can still beat the guy even if he goes under the screen. There's a bunch of different things you can do with guys kind of scheming that way. But for me, it was encouraging to see him kind of get back to the playmaking, getting guys involved, getting guys good looks, getting the bigs, hitting the bigs down low and things like that. So I was more encouraged more than anything. I think the minutes, I think the minutes in this kind of game, I don't think you can necessarily look at it too much.
Mhm.
A guy like Cade Tyson played 21 minutes and he was averaging 3 to 5 minutes a game coming into the game. So, the minutes, it's different whenever you have this kind of game as far as a tune-up game. But I think Elliott getting back to truly who he is and being a playmaker, I think that was big for me watching the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Against Georgia Tech, he had 4 assists on 7 turnovers. Much better on Saturday. That's the version of Elliott that UNC needs. I noticed he seemed a little bit more patient in some of the pick and rolls. It felt like at certain points in the season, UNC offense has been really stagnant. It feels like the only way that Elliott has been able to sort of create offense is just by recklessly kind of driving to the basket, almost like a fullback in football or something, and kind of just grinding his way to the basket, getting to the line and taking a layup. Felt like maybe in this one he was a little bit more patient, let things breathe. Good screens by VAL, good screens by James Brown, letting them roll to the rim, kind of letting the offense and the pieces all kind of work itself out. So I like that. It'll be tougher against Florida and UCLA these next two games because they'll have some really good defenders, better defenders, obviously, than he saw on Saturday. But I like that out of Elliott. And, the shooting, it is what it is. Right now on the season, he's 7 of 27 from the 3-point line, 26%. So, that's just, it's one of those things. Defenses know that. And as the season goes along, he's a basketball mastermind. He's a basketball genius. He'll learn how to play within those different defenses that he's seeing.
Yeah, I mean they've got some guys on that sideline too that are pretty smart coaching wise. So I'm sure, going into these type of games, there's different things that they're probably watching with him and um, showing him, hey, this guy's going under the screen every time. You either got to get the ball lower so the screener can get a hit on him, or you got to just step back and hit it, or uh, they call it racing. But whenever you come off that screen, they're trying to meet you on the other side underneath. If you just take off and try to beat them, there's just a bunch of different ways that you can, counteract that kind of scheme. Um, and I'm sure they're working on it and talking to him about it. It's just a matter of him, applying it to the games going forward.
And the games going forward are very tough. The schedule does not let up for North Carolina at all. I have this stat here from UNC. They gave this to us. This is the second time ever the Tar Heels will have played 4 top 10 opponents in one season prior to New Year's Day. They played Kansas, Auburn, Alabama, another one this week. The last time this happened was in 1967. All in the month of December when they lost to Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Princeton, and Utah. So I don't know what they were thinking in 1967 with that non-conference schedule. But North Carolina has a pretty tough one this year as well. Hubert, though, in a press conference today, he said he liked the practice that he's seeing, that the quote, honestly, the last 2 days of practice have been the best practices all year. So that's an encouraging sign heading into these games against Florida and UCLA. Justin, I never want to say must win or anything like that. It's too early in the season for any of that. And obviously, UNC wants to win both of these games. They want to beat Florida. They want to beat UCLA. But do you think it's important to get at least one of these from a team confidence perspective, from a resume perspective? It just feels like UNC has to find a way to get at least one of these this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to have one of the games out of the two. Obviously, getting both games would be great for the resume. I think the issue with, and maybe this is why Coach Davis schedules such a hard non-conference schedule. The ACC is kind of weaker this year as compared to years in the past, and so okay, you've got 2 games against Duke in conference. Clemson is kind of showing to be one of those better teams in the ACC. So you've got what, 1, maybe 2 against them. Um, and then outside of that, then it's probably North Carolina as far as who's going to be next in the ACC. So obviously those would be huge wins in conference, but when you look at the strength of schedule, the strength of schedule really doesn't mean anything if you don't get any wins out of that, right? So, obviously they've had a really tough go at it, really close one against Kansas, the whole Maui situation against Auburn, and losing to Michigan State, which I think would end up being a really big win if they had pulled that out. And then Alabama, I think you have to have one of these, and 2, I think um, would go a long way on their resume when it comes time for tournament time and seeding and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point about the ACC being down a little bit. Usually these sorts of challenging games are sprinkled all throughout the schedule, but UNC has had to bolster it given the state of the ACC. Ken Palm has their sort of rankings. They're different than the quad rankings, but similar. They have a tier A, tier B, and just the rest of the schedule. So UNC plays 2 tier A games this week against Florida and UCLA. They play one on January 1st against Louisville, and then they don't play another tier A game until a road trip to Pittsburgh on January 28th. So there's a super long stretch after that where they're going to have a quote unquote softer part of the schedule. So I think that speaks to the urgency that the Tar Heels need. Let's take a little bit of a closer look specifically at that Florida game on Tuesday. It's going to be a pro Tar Heels environment. It always is there in Charlotte. Um, this is a very, very good Florida team, though. I looked this up about Walter Clayton, who's one of their stars. He's made 5 3-pointers in 3 consecutive games, just the second Gator to do so ever since 2005, which is a crazy stat. There's probably some people in the chat who are already thinking to themselves, given UNC's luck, that streak is probably going to continue for Clayton on Tuesday. Looking specifically at that Florida matchup, Justin, what's some of the things that stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. Florida, obviously, I think has a little more length and size inside. I'll say size. Their main big is kind of taller, lankier, but he's 6'11". So you've got that inside. Like you said, Walter Clayton is their best player and the guy that kind of gets them going. But they also have a few more guards as well that can really shoot it from the outside, a little bit stronger and bigger. So this game, we talk about how North Carolina's strength is the guard play. Well, they're going up against another team, a top 10 team, who is the same exact way, plus a little bit more length inside. So I think with the way North Carolina's been playing defense the last few games, if they can translate that to the level that they need to be at against a Florida team, I think they have a really good chance. Obviously, like you said, being in Charlotte, having probably a majority of Carolina blue in the arena, feeling kind of like a home game. I think that obviously helps them a lot. But I think it's going to come down to those guard matchups. That they don't necessarily have huge guards. So the size at the guard position isn't necessarily an issue. At least I don't think it will be. But who's going to kind of take that challenge to, the saying is, cut the head off of the snake, right? So getting Walter Clayton and kind of, whether that's Seth or Elliot or whoever it might be, Drake maybe, kind of causing his evening to be really, really tough to make things even tougher for everybody else. So, it's and on this at the same time, Florida really plays defense. Florida, they're holding opponents to 38% from the field and 30 from three, right? So, it's one of those things where offensively they've really got to figure out, how are we going to attack this defense who, likes to smother you a little bit and play some really good defense. Can RJ get it going? I think this is a game where he's really going to have to get it going. I think, Seth is going to have to continue to be aggressive, getting downhill, maybe getting some of those guards in foul trouble, getting the bigs in foul trouble down low. And then just, what other ways can they attack this defense? I think that's going to be big, but I think it's going to come down to the guard matchups on the perimeter and who's going to take that challenge.
Florida is also a very, very good offensive rebounding team. They're up there with one of the best teams in the country in that category. That kind of leads me into this question from Bart Watts. How do we scheme against Florida's size? We know they have a lot of size all across their roster. They're a good rebounding team. What are some things that UNC could do schematically to mitigate that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different things. Offensively, if they're killing them by throwing the ball in the post, you could throw a zone at them. You could throw a double team at them. As far as rebounding, it's just going to be taking the challenge and getting guys out of there. Offensively with their size, it's a matter of getting those bigs stretched out on the floor, getting them into actions, not allowing the bigs just to sit down low and be the help side defender at the rim. We saw that's what Alabama did against them. They just left big fella down there and he was just protecting the rim all night long. And so there's different ways to attack teams with size. Getting out in transition, bigs don't like to run. So, getting the rebound and going. There's a bunch of different things, but I think with this, with the way that this offense is, as far as, open spacing, pick and rolls, all that sort of stuff, I think it's going to be really key. And I talked about it a little bit earlier, really key on getting hits in screens. I think a lot of times whenever this offense has struggled, the bigs have kind of slipped out of screens when they should probably get a hit on the guard and not really getting, a screen set. That was one thing when I was at North Carolina that, we had some really good screen setters. Kennedy was able to get a hit, it felt like, on the guard. Anytime he anytime he set his mind to it, he was getting a hit on the guard, and the guard was able to get downhill and take advantage of that. Um, and then guards also on teams that I was on were really good screeners. So a lot of times being the screener, you're going to be the one that's open anyways. So I think getting hits, being physical, spacing the floor on offense, getting the bigs stretched out and not being able just to sit in the paint is going to be key for them attacking this defense and the size that they have inside.
My key to the game is a strong start, a fast start. Felt like against Alabama, just UNC was out of the game so quickly. The air went out of the Smith Center. I also saw this stat. UNC is 5-0 this season when they lead at half, 1-4 when they trail at halftime. So a little bit of a small sample size there. But for as much as we talk about UNC coming back throughout the season and fighting, I want to see them start strong and finish strong in a game like this. Let us know in the chat if you're going to be there on Tuesday, tomorrow night in Charlotte, or if you're going to be there on Madison Square Garden on Saturday. I think my brother is going tomorrow in Charlotte. I will not be at either game, especially not in Madison Square Garden because the hotel prices are expensive. I don't know if you've seen this, Justin, but it's insane around the holidays now in New York City. But a lot of fun basketball for the Tar Heels this week. Justin, I'll let you close us out here. It's 8:48 on a Monday night. We've got 63 Tar Heel fans here in the chat talking UNC basketball with us, which is awesome. We appreciate everyone for all the comments throughout the night. Justin, any final thoughts, final notes as we close out this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always fun getting on here talking about what's going on in North Carolina, and I know obviously it's Monday Night Football with 2 games on tonight, so for y'all to be in the chat, hanging out with us, we appreciate y'all for sure. Hopefully, things that we talked about, you know, hopefully it was helpful or answered any questions. I'm really excited for these next 2 games in particular. I think it's going to be a really big, week or so where they could really set themselves up really well as far as building their resume going into the ACC tournament. Not only building a resume, but also building their confidence. You beat 2 really good teams like this going into conference play. You're feeling really good about yourself. So really excited to kind of see, starting tomorrow, how they're able to, start off and hopefully, slow Florida down and attack them in all the ways that we talked about. And, then move on to the next one on Saturday. But, super excited for this team. I think, these last couple games have been really big as far as just kind of tightening some things up. And hopefully they're able to carry it over and guys are able to carry over the confidence that we saw in the last game and, just kind of keep on building. So once again, thank you so much. I hope everybody has an unbelievable night, an unbelievable week. We'll be back next week.